in today's episode of Rob Konrad Conversations. Mirna Valerio.
But I was like, this is what I am meant to be doing. Running has brought me like this incredible, not only this incredible sense of self and and power and strength, but it has brought me this community that I love so much. It's hard for me. It's hard to deal with, when people are super negative, and especially when it comes to something that brings me so much joy and so much fulfillment and self-actualization.
She's an ultramarathon runner.
You can say big bones, you can say fat, you can say curvy, voluptuous. A lot of people take issue when you can't say you're fat because, I'm offended by that. I'm like, but I'm not writing about you.
Who defies all stereotypes.
I'm trying to prove to myself, not trying to prove anything to anyone else, but to myself that, I can do very difficult things. I do want to show people that you can, wherever you are and whatever skin you're in, whatever body you're in, that you can have fun and you can explore.
Join the conversation now.
Welcome to Rob Konrad Conversations. Conversations with extraordinary people that motivate and inspire. Learn, grow, and impact lives. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon for a new conversation every week.
Here comes the sunshine and burns away clouds like they never were.
Hey, welcome. This is Rob Konrad from Switzerland. When I think about marathon runners or even ultramarathon runners, the picture I have in my head is a middle-aged, wiry man with a stubborn look on his withered face, suffering away mile after mile, checking his watch, pushing a little button every so often. So that's the image I have in my head. Mirna Valerio doesn't exactly fit the stereotype. She's running marathons and ultramarathons, yes, but she's a woman. Isn't white, and she's more on the big side. Mirna is the Fat Girl Running, which is also the name of her blog. She's the author of the book A Beautiful Work in Progress, a fitness model, a trained opera singer, Spanish teacher, and director of equity and inclusion. Unfortunately, as you'll probably see in this conversation, she's really uncommunicative, she's tight-lipped and has no sense of humor whatsoever, but I'll do my best to get at least a little bit out of her to talk about running, stereotypes, body positivity, music, and we'll see what else. Thanks for taking the time and talking with me today, Mirna Valerio. Wie geht es dir?
Good morning. Oh, yeah. Well, it's morning in my area of the world. I guess it's afternoon.
It's like 5 p.m.
Are.
Yeah, where I am. Yes, exactly.
But hello. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I've read somewhere you were an Afro-Latina. Is it right?
Yes, I am partially Central American. So my father was Honduran, from Honduras, and my mother is from Brooklyn.
So it's like African American with a shorter fuse and hotter temper from the.
I've always had a short fuse, so I don't know which part of my identity that fits, But yeah, so I'm definitely Hispanic, African American. I just say Black, so I've got all these like interesting aspects to myself.
Yeah, and you speak German. That's also amazing that we found out.
Ja, ich kann Deutsch ein bisschen.
Wunderbar. So, why did you learn that?
As a singer, I had to study German along with Italian, French, and some other languages, and I. I'm a linguist. I love languages. I learn them very easily, and it helps me communicate with people from all over the world. So, I have to practice my German because I am actually going to be doing Berlin Marathon in September.
Okay.
I have to find some people to talk with. So I come up as like a typical American and doesn't know anything.
Why Berlin? I mean, there's probably other marathons which are a bit closer to your location.
I mean, why not? I also got an invite, so.
Okay.
So I'm not going to pass it up.
Fair enough. You've ever been to Germany before?
I have not, and I've been, I have been to Europe many, many times. My husband has been back and forth to like München and Hamburg, and I have, only been in France, Italy, and Spain. That's where I go.
Ah, okay. So how long are you going to stay? Any plans to like stop by in Switzerland or something?
I might, because I need a watch and I need some chocolate. So, I'm going to make it a whole probably week and a half long adventure. So I can,
Cool.
go and like go to the mountains and do some trail running and stuff because I can't just go and road run.
Yeah, well, let me know if you're anywhere near Switzerland because where we live, it's a really beautiful scenery. You have beautiful hikes and everything. So I can send you some pictures later on too.
Okay, when I show up at your doorstep, don't act like you don't know me.
Who's that? So, one thing I just kind of want to get out of the way right at the beginning. You call yourself like the fat girl running, but like if I refer to your body weight in the conversation, what's the appropriate way to? Is it like? Shall we dance around saying big boned or something like that, or is it big?
You can say big boned. You can say fat. You can say curvy, voluptuous. The words that trigger me the most are obese and overweight.
Okay.
Those are the two words that that really just send me somewhere to a negative place because they're very sort of clinical and judgmental, I think. So, I'm really trying to reclaim the word fat. It's just a descriptor. So I'm totally okay if you say as a fat girl or as a big girl or as a, larger woman.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's start here because it kind of triggers something. And I read in your book that you mentioned sometimes people, kind of refer to big people or whatever as with these terms, and they do it in a seemingly positive way. Also, it's great that person is running, and it's great that person is.
Oh my God!
It's so amazing. And you described that really takes you off quite a bit. So can you explain why that is?
Well, I think people are really well intentioned most of the time. I don't think most human beings have it out to be malicious or mean to other human beings, but there are some people that are. But, I think, when you see somebody out, like somebody like me running, or, somebody else who's big, somebody else who's fat, or somebody else who doesn't fit what your perceived norm of a runner is. And, they're like, oh, wow, way to go. So glad you're out here. Oh, my God, look at you. Look at you. That's the one thing, I'm like, well, yeah, okay, look at me. What, I'm running. I'm doing what humans are designed to do. And, because they have not maybe seen that represented in their world or in their life experience. It's a weird thing. And so they get all excited about it and they assume things about why you're out there. Like, oh, you're trying to lose weight. You're on a weight loss journey. Or, this is really hard for you. Wow. And so there's there are a lot of assumptions in those type of comments. But, I really do try to take everything, that is intended as a compliment. I try to take it as a compliment, but it's really hard. Because those compliments are coming from a place where, you're an anomaly or you are, it's so weird to see you out here. And some people say that. They say, wow, it's just so, I've never seen anybody like you out here. And it just creates this chasm, I'm just trying to run. I'm just trying to be on the trails. But I get it. I get people are trying to be supportive. But sometimes that support comes from a really presumptuous place.
Okay. So they're stereotyping you in a way that you shouldn't be here, but it's great that you are, so that we can openly welcome you and as part of our community, which is like the non-fat people.
Because you clearly don't belong. But we're gonna be like extra. Okay. It's kind of like I was in Italy once for an opera program, and this has nothing to do with running, but it's a very similar experience. I went to Italy. I already knew quite a bit of Italian, and I went with a lot of Americans, and I speak a lot of languages, and I'm in the most advanced class. But this one guy that worked in the office just thought that he took a look at me. I did not speak Italian. He's like, Mirna. Noi, he's like, does all this. He's like, noi siamo la tua famiglia. oh, capito, and I'm like, yeah, voi siete mia familia. Grazie. He's like, oh, why? I took one look at you. I didn't think you spoke Italian. And it's so it's these assumptions that people make, and they do really try to embrace you. But it also like, I'm like, can you just say hi, give me a high five and keep going. So, I mean, and that sounds like very sort of narcissistic but when it happens over and over again, when people are like surprised that you're there, they're surprised that you can do a 50K, they're surprised that you go to the gym and you bare your arms there and oh, you're so courageous. I'm not courageous. I'm dressing so that I can be comfortable. So there's this like conflation of like what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, yeah, it does, I don't want to seem like a jerk, but it does it nicks at you over and over again when those assumptions are made. That was a very long answer to your question.
No, but I think it's interesting. It's important to understand because in a way it's a natural reaction. I mean, it's you're not fitting the norm, whatever the norm is. So right. I can see where those people are coming from, but I totally get where this is inappropriate and it is stereotyping people and no, not probably most of the cases, as you said, not intentionally, but it is stereotyping.
Right, but it is, yeah, because I mean, but we're humans. We do place people in boxes because it makes it easier for us to navigate society, right? Yeah. But we also have the intellectual capability to go beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some people who really attack you right away. So there's the short documentary or this little movie about you. And what happened to those who haven't seen it? So while you were running and while you're making this documentary, basically you've received an email from someone, calling you a fraud and right. really calling you horrible names for running, and now it's all fake, and you can't be. How can you possibly be running? So it's all for the media, right. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what that did with you and what that the reaction you had to that.
Right. So when I started my blog, Fat Girl Running, first of all, a lot of people took issue with the name of the blog because, you can't say you're fat because, like I'm offended by that. I'm like, but I'm not writing about you. I'm writing about you. And the whole purpose of the blog was to talk about my experiences being a larger athlete amongst thinner athletes, and specifically in long distance and endurance events. And even, like I would have conversations with people. I would, I'd be out on the trail and people would say things like, wow, I don't believe you're still out here. Or wow, like maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should just try for the 5K because it's shorter, it's better for your body. Or, like I'd be training and some guy would, and I'd be jogging or running, whatever you want to call it. And a guy would pass me and say, you'd lose more weight if you walked. And I said, bro, I'm training for 3 marathons. He's like, oh, my bad. Oh, And so like there are all of these, again, assumptions and these thoughts that people have because they have a particular norm or they have a particular picture of who should be a runner or who can be a runner. And so I do, I have in the past received some commentary or feedback. And this one thing that you're talking about, the video, the REI presents the Mirnovator, that film was supposed to be about a Black woman in running, like in the woods. Because that's another issue in the outdoor industry. There's not a lot of diversity. They're working on it, but it's slow going, and progress is slow going. And so like they commissioned the filmmaker to make this film about me and an ultra runner, and I already had notoriety. I'd already been featured in Runner's World and Wall Street Journal and other media outlets. And so, but this film, I'm just doing a 50K because I'm gearing up towards a really huge race at the end of the summer. So she came out, the filmmaker came out, and was posted herself in different places, and we're having a good time, and it was a really sort of raw picture of me at doing what I do. And while she's filming, I take out my camera to do a selfie with my friends because my friends did the last loop with me. And then I get this notification, and there's this email, and the email, the title of the email, the subject line was running. And so I thought maybe, maybe it's one of my cross country athletes' parents. Maybe it's a question about my cross country program. Maybe it's one of my fans, because sometimes they find my email, my work email. They they dig, and
it's in your book as well.
and yeah, and it takes time to do that, right? So so I opened the email. Everybody has their phone on the trail now. So I opened it up, and I read this these vitriolic words, aimed at hurting me and telling me that my body was not worthy, that what I was doing was fake, that I was trying to get people to accept fat people, and and that's deadly, and that hurt. While I'm at the most vulnerable point in my race, I was almost finished, but I was in pain. I was tired. I was chafing everywhere. I just wanted it to be over. It was wet. I was cold. And then all these things were going through my head. And to receive those words that were very specifically aimed at hurting me and making it known that I was not a worthy human being. At that point in the race, while I was doing something I loved, it was very painful. It was very traumatic. And so at the end, I showed my friends, and they were like, they're like, oh my God, what? You're actually doing the thing that he says that you don't do. Like you're at 50K and you're almost done. And they're like, screw him. They said some other words with expletives. I won't repeat them now. But, and so, I said, well, you know what? I'm going to put my phone away before I post this on Instagram, because I wanted to share with people, like, this is real. Like, this really happens. Like, when people tell you like that people make comments to them at the gym or while they're out running, or people yell things out the window, they're not lying. They're not lying. It's a reality. Because again, when people are confronted with something that alters their reality, sometimes they react violently. And I don't mean just like physically violently, but like, they're verbally abusive, they're emotionally abusive. And many, many people go through that, even people who are not fat. So, so I posted it on Instagram, and then that kind of went viral itself. I got like 250 comments after a couple of minutes, and then many, many more when I finished. And then when I get to the end, the filmmaker congratulates me. She's like, "Oh, you did such a great job. Congratulations. But by the way, I'm so sorry about that email that you got. Like, I saw that because she's waiting at the end, so she has nothing to do but be on her Instagram." And she's like, "That's awful." And so after that, after I cleaned up and everything, she's like, "By the way, if you want to talk about that, when I come back to film you some more in a few weeks, we can talk about it." And I was like, "I don't want to talk about that." In my mind, I didn't say, I said, "Well, maybe," because that's, that'll just mar my experience. But when she did come back at the very end of her stay while we were shooting, she says, "Are you ready for this?" And I said, "What?" She says, "Take out your phone and bring up the email." And then all of these emotions start coming back. And I'm not a crier, so like I didn't cry during the film, but I definitely shed some tears in private. And she had me read this email again, and I'm like, wow, oh my God, like I think, had I been a different person, had I not had my friends around, had I not had a community to fall back on, had I not had a loving family and a loving workplace, that might have gone very differently.
In what way?
I might have stopped running. I might have really internalized the feeling of worthlessness. I don't know. I may have done something else. But I'm really proud and happy that I belong to the trail running community. Is amazing. Like the running community in general is amazing. And then the people who do and say things like that, they may be runners too, but they're far and few between. Because most people that I encounter on the trail or in my running life are incredibly supportive, and it's usually the people that don't really run, that don't engage in the kinds of activities that I do, and aren't able to see the plethora of types of bodies that are out there, types of people, the genders, and they don't see that because they have this very limited view, the very limited experience. And those are the people that, you know, come at me and others with all the negativity and the doubt and the, you know, I don't believe you did that. There's no way that you did that.
Did that person identify himself as who he is? So
yeah.
So he was,
yeah, I mean, it was his email was, you know, it had his name in it.
So it was like an anonymous troll who just tried to cause some.
It wasn't
it was
anonymous.
Someone who really had that opinion and really just wanted to hurt you and to mess with
He
you.
really needed to, you know, and he signed his name at the bottom. And so when I posted the Instagram, I left his name up there.
Did you reply to him?
Did I?
Did you reply to him?
No, no.
Okay, so you never challenged him?
I'd never had any intention of replying. But, you know, the funny thing is that, you know, when I posted it with his name, people looked him up. Because it was not a very common name. And so I got lots of messages. Some people DM'd me and inboxed me and with, you know, well, you know, if you want my, you know, I saw his social media and he's not a very attractive guy. You know, and I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. You know, like I said my piece. And I can't remember what exactly it was that I wrote on Instagram. I mean, it's up there. I left it up there, but and I said, you know, this stuff really happens, and you know, people try to excoriate me. That's the word I use for doing what I do, for my existence. And you know, but like lots of people, I had so many positive comments and you know, words of support and encouragement and gratitude. Thank you for being out there. Thank you for putting yourself out there, because I wouldn't be able to do that. Or you know, like if you want my running club to go run by this guy's house, you know, we'll do it
with chains
and I said
baseball bats.
I don't want any part of that. I don't want to go to jail.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, so like it's been really interesting. That video went viral. And I think REI, which was the company that had commissioned it, you know, I think they had planned on releasing it later, but it was so good that they released it early. And then it just did its own thing and ran away, and it's still like I get messages every single day. I just saw your video on YouTube, or I just saw it on the REI website, or I just saw it. Somebody shared it with me, and wow, it changed my life. You keep going, and you know, it came out in 2017, so it's, you know, like a year and a half ago now, and it's still on the film festival circuits, which I think is incredible. And it's, you know, it's still, as people say, they're still changing people's lives, you know, like, you know, because they just saw, you know, like, here I am just going out and doing what I do because I love doing it. And, you know, that's how I fulfill my soul and my spirit and, you know, my sort of physical needs as a human being. And, you know, and somebody's just kind of trying to step on me for doing that. And for many people, it resonated with them because, you know, maybe it wasn't running, maybe it's something else, maybe it had nothing to do with any kind of exercise, but maybe it's something in their lives that they love to do and that they need to do that people just absolutely excoriate them for doing it and for existing. And so it spoke to a lot of people, and, you know, it still does. And I'm not happy that happened, you know, but it turned out to be an incredible gift.
Why do you think it is that people react so aggressively in that way? Because it wasn't like a short comment, it was like a long email and someone put some time and effort into writing that. So I'm always wondering if something annoys you that much that you spend half an hour, you know, typing up an email and sending it with your full name, you know, there must be something, I don't know, lacking or something where you're like unhappy in your own life that seeing that hurts you so much that you take the time to kind of vent your anger. So I'm always wondering, what's your take on that?
Right. And, and the question is, how, like, what motivates somebody to do that? To dig, he had to dig and like do a Google search and find out where I worked. I mean, everybody knew where I worked at that point. And like maybe tried a couple of different ways to write my name for the email, my work email. And, but, and I had also been on TV 3 times that week. So I was like, maybe he was tired of seeing me, and, but all of that said, that comes from people's own darkness. And, that's the only way that I think that can be justified. Like somebody is dealing with their own darkness, whatever is going on with them. They try to externalize that and they put it on somebody else. They lash out at other people because they have something going on with them. And, and it hurts other people. But you know what? That has nothing to do with me. The fact that you think this or you think that, maybe that person is on a weight loss journey. Maybe by looking at me and seeing that I do run the miles that I do, maybe it scares them because they think that they're going to lose a lot of weight. And then I haven't lost. I mean, I lost 70 pounds a long time ago when I first restarted running. And, but I also worked out for 5.5 hours a day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
that's a
but people don't see that. They don't know that. And, and then I stopped doing that and I just kept running because I was doing other things. And so like, I think by looking at people are like, oh, well, I don't want to stay fat. I don't want to, and so that makes them scared. And, and so like, I think that people do react in a certain way based on their own expectations of themselves or their own, whatever they are lacking in themselves, and so I think that's what it is. And so like, I have to actively talk myself out of internalizing other people's darkness. And it's hard sometimes. I have a friend who's kind of in a similar arena that I am in. You probably know who she is, Latoya Snell. So she's also an ultra runner. She's a big girl. She's Black. And she's a very different style than I do, but that, people are also questioning what she does. And, she lifts weight, she does this, and they question and they constantly try to bring her down because, again, she doesn't fit the perceived norm of what a runner is or what somebody who exercises is or looks like or can be or can do. And just because that's something that they haven't experienced. And so that makes people react in a certain way. It's hard for me. It's hard to deal with, when people are super negative, and especially when it comes to something that brings me so much joy and so much fulfillment and self-actualization. It's hard when people attack that.
And in a way, it's always hard to, even if it's your thing and that they can't take it away from you, it's hard to deflect these things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because we're human beings and we have emotions and we are sponges. And that's why I do, like, I really have an incredible community, and I try to surround myself, and I do surround myself with people I know that are going to have my back all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely amazing. And you said a few moments ago, and I really like that, running is something that kind of nourishes your soul or feeds your soul. And in your book, you describe it in a really nice way. You say, like you make the comparison between running and playing the piano. So, so it's like playing the piano more, or like running more doesn't make you a better runner, but it makes you a better person because it's difficult, and the pleasure of engaging in a difficulty makes you a better person. And I really like that. Because that's at the end that's what it's all about. I mean, it's not about perfection. It's not about achieving being the world's best runner.
Right. And for some people that is, like, some people they need to be the elite runners. They need to like be able to qualify for Boston. They need to do whatever. And I will never be able to do that. I ran Boston. I didn't have to qualify, but that was a special circumstance. But it is, the funny thing was that was one of the chapters in my book that was edited the most because it was so long. Because I just went on and on about, playing Rachmaninoff and playing. And they're like,
Mirna,
it's too long.
Stop it.
No one's gonna understand. It is, I love the piano, and I've spent countless hours and hours practicing and playing, and I don't have my fingers are fine, but I will never be a great pianist. And that's okay because I do it because I love the music, and the fact that I'm able to play the music, even though it's not always perfect, even though my fingers get stuck sometimes, but it brings me so much joy. Like in high school, I'd spend hours and hours and hours singing and playing piano. Like singing, I'm good at. So excuse me, that's on another realm. But piano, because it just allows me it allows me to explore all these nooks and crannies of music that that not everybody has access to. It allows me to do that. And running does the same thing. And my legs allow me to explore these incredible trails, the world, in a way that most people don't get to do, and that is just so nourishing and so exciting. And it's still hard for me. It is, every now and then I get into flow. Yesterday, when I was on the mountain with one of my former students, I was in a flow, even though I'm sick, a really bad chest cold, and I'm at altitude after coming from sea level. But there were moments when we're just running silently on the trail. It's snow covered. The sun is coming up over the mountain, and it's just this experience that, it's I'm getting a little teary because it's just so beautiful and so human, and it's this thing that, not everybody has access to. And so I'm so grateful for that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm getting really emotional, but that's what it is, whether it's playing piano or doing something that really just engages every part of your humanity, your soul, your physicality, your emotions, your mentality, the way you interact with people, the way you react to people, the way you are in the world, and so it feeds everything.
Mm-hmm. So what goes through your mind when you're running? So after a while, I guess in the beginning it's you need to find your rhythm, but then after a while it's just for me, and I have to say I'm not really a runner. I never looked like that. I never had the magic moment. So for me, it's just boring. If I run, I wish it would be over. So what goes through your mind when you getting into the flow, and when you start experiencing this magic?
Well, it's I'm super happy that I have that we have these incredible phones now that we can take pictures with, mm-hmm. because I look for beauty when I run. Mm-hmm. So because running is not super easy for me. I mean, it's easier than it used to be. I can go out, if I need to run 5 miles, I'll run 5 miles, but it's, there's always that first 1.5 miles or 2 or 4 that are, I'm like, why am I doing this again? Oh, my chest hurts, my legs hurt, I'm so sore. Oh, I just want to go back to bed. Mm-hmm. But then that's your body just working things out and getting you ready for an incredible experience. And so you don't always have an incredible experience, but when I do, it's really powerful. But normally, I get out and after as I said, after about 1.5 miles, 2 miles, depending on if it's flat or hilly, then I start. I start processing my day, or what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. I think about a whole bunch of things, and the moment when I'm not thinking about a whole bunch of things is when I have achieved flow. Mm-hmm. And when I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm moving my body like this, when I'm not thinking about what I have to do tomorrow, when I have to buy this plane ticket for that, and I'm just moving my body as it was intended to move. And it's like it's a very sort of meditative period. Again, it doesn't happen every single time because sometimes I'm just so consumed with my day and with the things that I have to do that I just can't let it go. But when I can let it go, like you're like floating on air. And it's not, and that's not endorphins. That's not, the runner's high. That's not that. It's just a state of flow. And anyone can reach a state of flow in whatever they're doing when they're completely engaged in something that time doesn't exist. Nothing exists but what you're doing. And it's amazing. And then when you come out of it, you're like, oh, whoa. Like I could do this forever. And then like you trip and you fall, you lose concentration. So that's what it is. Like it doesn't happen every single time. But I definitely, after every run, I'm like, wow, like I did that. That's really cool. And I keep talking about this run I did yesterday because it was so fantastic, even though I wasn't feeling well, and I couldn't breathe. But I was like, this is what I am meant to be doing. And it, was hard. I'm super sore because we were like going up a mountain from it yesterday. But, like I had an incredible running partner with me, one of my former students. And, and it's just like everything comes back to me. Like, people are coming back into my life that I care about and that I love and, that are my community. And so like running has brought me like this incredible, not only this incredible sense of self and and power and strength, but it has brought me this community that I love so much.
Okay. And I mean, you're running marathons and ultra marathons, and can you talk a little bit about the psychology of running a marathon and ultra marathon? For me, the way I imagine it must be the sequence of death and rebirth in a way, because it just feels like seems like it's such a horrible thing for me to run that distance. So I mean, there must be a point when you're running, like if you're running 20 kilometers, okay, that's miles or whatever, that's okay, that's a reasonable distance to run. But like if you're doing 2 times that or 4 times that or even more, I mean, there must be a point where just the suffering takes over. So what are the stages that you go through and why are you doing that?
Well, there's some people that are attracted to suffering, I think. Because I think, and maybe, yes, I am. I mean, if I do ultra marathoning, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or marathoning, because you learn so much from it. While you're in the actual trenches of suffering, whether it's physical suffering, whether you're in pain or you're sore or your hip hurts or your back hurts, and it's not like like a serious pain like that, but it's painful, and you really have to dig deep, and then it becomes a mental thing. So most people can run or walk long distances. And I think obviously not people who are disabled in a way that affects their mobility, but most people are able to do that, and we just don't know. We don't know until we try, until we push ourselves, until we go through that suffering, until we discover that, even though I was suffering, even though I was really dehydrated, I got some water, I got some food, I was able to continue doing that, even though I was in the trenches, even though I had an incredibly low point, where I was like, why am I doing this? This is dumb. I don't understand why I go out there and I'm trying to run 62 miles and it's dark. My headlamp blew out. I'm going to crash into a cactus. It's the first chapter of my book, right?
Yeah.
Like, why am I doing this? What am I trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to prove to myself, not trying to prove anything to anyone else, but to myself that, I can do very difficult things and I can survive and I can learn from it. And so I learned so much from those moments where I am questioning my life and my life choices because my foot hurts or because, I have 15 miles ahead of me and it's so boring. I don't have anybody to talk to and there are only trees around. But, but I think that skill, the ability to just to suffer and to know that you're suffering, the ability to deal with that and to know that at some point you're not going to be suffering, and to look expectantly at that point when you're, like the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And then to get there and still be alive, and you're like, okay, well, I can do that. Wow. So I can work on this huge project at work, even though there's no end in sight. I can suffer. But I have to still keep toiling. I have to do the work. I have to keep moving my feet forward. I have to keep doing this. I have to keep doing that, because that's the only way that I'm going to get closer to where I need to be. So all of those lessons are transferable. And I think, that's one of the things that's very attractive about marathoning or ultramarathoning. I also just like to be out in the woods for as long as I can, and if I can get more miles faster, like, for me, I'm not very fast, but I'm not fast at all, but it gives me more time out in the woods, and, it allows me to connect with nature in the most visceral human way possible. So I'm out there in the trails. It's just me and the trails, and some deer and maybe some panthers. And
some bear cubs.
Huh?
Some bears and some bear cubs.
Some bears. Yes. Bears. Right. But even, like just this past weekend, I was, I did a couple of loops at a race, not too far from where I am in Colorado. And I had intended to do 18, 20 miles on this course. It was a loop course. And so my fourth loop, it was dark and I had my headlamp on, and I was on this part of the trail that nobody else was on. And because other people were doing the longer trails, and I said, I'm just going to do the short one. But it so happened that as soon as it got dark, the animals came out, and so like I'm on the trail, and to my left are eyes looking at me. And I couldn't tell which kind of animals they were. And then I got all, of course I got all freaked out, and I started singing really loudly. I was actually singing Foray really loudly and just talking to myself, and I picked up the stick, and it was like my adrenaline was just out of control. And I started, I was uphill, so I was like hiking really, really fast to get out of there, because we had just had this incident last week where a man got attacked by a mountain lion in the same area. Okay, shit. And so he ended up killing the mountain lion. Wow. He choked it. Yes, right. like superhero Chuck Norris as a trail runner. And so and there are all these signs in this park about mountain lions and bears. And it's like bears, and they freak me out, but like I know that they're not after me. Mountain lions, on the other hand, so I'm like thinking like maybe that's a mountain lion, maybe there are two mountain lions that are stalking me. Oh my goodness. But in that fear, and in that just kind of getting freaked out, there was a lot of, I'm like, wow, this is, I'm human. Like I'm a part of the natural world. And that, it was like a half an hour after that happened, like when I had calmed down, and like there were no other animals that I could see following me, but I was like, this is the essence of what it is to be a part of the universe. And so that is, like even those experiences are scary, and like, I don't want to be attacked by anything. It was probably deer. So, but even those things are scary. It also reminds me on a daily basis that, I am a part of this natural world, and I'm a very small speck, a nanospeck of the larger universe. And that, it constantly reminds me to be grateful. It reminds me to express gratitude, to be kind to people, because, that's all we got, to take care of our earth. It's all we got.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason I brought this up was for those who are watching or listening to this and who didn't read your book. You write in your book about your first encounters with bears and how you got scared and didn't know what to do. And I found it. You have a great writing style. I love it. It's like a mix of this like stream of consciousness, sprinkled with profanities.
A lot of profanity.
so I love the way you write, and that was just hilarious. How you didn't know what to do next? Like, okay, shit, bears. Now what? what now? So read the book. It's a great book. Really, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Okay. So it's really about the experience. It's not only the experience with yourself, but also the experience with nature. That's a great way to put it. I like that.
Yeah.
Talking about your book, one thing that stuck with me was flipped over the phone here. The microphone. You wrote about one incident where you were on, I don't know, was it on a bus or on a train with a guy named Jerry who slapped your ass basically, and then you revenged that by I don't know, spraying some lotion in his face, and then basically he called you I think something like a fat bitch or something like that. That's
fat bitch.
Yeah. And,
oh my goodness.
And you wrote about how everyone around you was just you were quite young at the time, and all the adults around you didn't react to it, and that was something that really hurt you or stuck with you. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the incident, and also what kind of reaction you would have expected from people around you in a situation like that.
No one has ever asked me about that. This is wow. Because as you said, it was definitely something that stayed with me and continues to stay with me, even as an adult. Okay. So as a middle school student, I was very, very shy, and
which is hard to believe.
I know. Nobody believes me. I was very shy. I didn't look people in the eye. I knew I was really smart, so I knew I had that going for me, but I had no social skills whatsoever. And so, so we're a group of kids. We're going home, and these kids are like the upper echelon academically of kids at the school. And so we're traveling together, and I always traveled with them, kind of on the periphery, not in their group, but because I didn't want to be alone. And so I'd watch them all the time. Sometimes I'd be included. Most times I won't. Most of the times I was not included. And so anyway, we had this day that was called National Butt Day, that they made up. It wasn't a national thing. And so what you were supposed to do was to go around slapping people's butts as hard as you could. And it was funny. For a lot of people, it was funny, but you really only did it to people within your social circle. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a lot of people there, with 2 or 3 of me, and we were super nerdy. And so it lasted the entire day. So we're on the train, everyone's going home. And so this guy, Jerry, that's not his real name, comes up to me and just slaps me as hard as he could. And it was really painful. And, and it took me off guard because I had not been part of the group. I was just kind of standing there reading my book. And then everyone starts laughing. And then I just got really, I didn't know what to do. And so I was really angry. And so, I wanted him to have a piece of my mind. And I wanted to let him know that wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. And so I took my lotion out because I always had lotion on me. And I actually had 2 bottles, and I know exactly, it was a white bottle, was from was hospital lotion that my stepfather would get all the time from his job. And I squirted it on his head. And then that's when he called me a fat. He was like, "You fat bitch!" And it kind of stunned everybody. Even stunned these people, many of whom are my Facebook friends now. Who were in that social group, and I don't think anyone kind of knew what to do. And there were adults on the train, and of course this is New York City, so things happen all the time, and people ignore them. And because people are, there's lots of crazy people, lots of people who are sort of out of your perceived norm. You just kind of look at them, and then you go back to what you're doing. And but I think I think one of the reasons I became a teacher is because I hate things like that. And if I can stop that kind of behavior by making sure that kids are in a loving environment, and then and absolutely not allowing and calling out that behavior to students and to other adults, then that would I think it would put a stop to bullying. When kids know that, adults have their back, even if you don't know the kid, but that just happened, that's wrong. So like, in New York, people are like, well, I'm not gonna get involved in that. That's not my thing. But you can see somebody clearly hurting. It would have been so cool if some adult would have stepped in and like, hey, checked in with me. Hey, are you all right? Like that wasn't cool that he called you a fat bitch. It probably wasn't cool that you put lotion in his head, but he had no business slapping you like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't laughing. Like it clearly wasn't funny to me. So yeah, I think, and the more that we allow people to just say and do whatever it is, like I always saw my job as a diversity director, because I don't actually do that. I mean, I do diversity, but I'm actually not at school anymore. I left my teaching job. Okay. To be a full-time speaker and writer and an athlete. And so like I always saw my job, and pardon my expression, my job was to teach people not to be assholes. How not to do that. Yeah. And, like if you think about it, that's it. There are certain behaviors that like should not be accepted. And we as a society are accepting this destructive behavior from person to person, and we're not stepping in. We're being bystanders. And that creates this culture where people just do and say whatever the hell it is they want to say, even if it's hurtful, even if they know it's hurtful. Sometimes we don't know that things are hurtful. Sometimes we do have good intentions. But intentions aren't everything. It's about impact, how you impact somebody else's being and their existence. And very often we don't have that in mind when we're talking or when we're acting or when we're working or when we're doing whatever it is that we do. We don't have other people in mind. It's a very self-centered existence. And so once we are able to stop those behaviors and address them, as they are, hey, look, that is destructive. We cannot have that here. You just hurt this other person, and you just, made this other person feel worthless. Like, what does that do? What does that do for you? And so that's like, I wish someone had stepped in, but they didn't. I got over it. And I'm like, I'm a very successful adult. So I'm like, all right. Yeah. Like, you didn't change me. Like, you didn't, again, if I were someone different, if I had no self-esteem, I had some social anxiety, but I did have self-esteem, I knew I was really smart, and I knew I was going to be successful. So, but not everybody has that. Not everyone has this sort of intrinsic feeling of self-worth. And that's what's scary to me, because when I, work with my community of people that follow me, people who are my fans, a lot of people have issues with feelings of self-worth. They feel like they have none. Or they have no self-esteem or no confidence and no ability to kind of try something new because they're afraid they're going to fail, because others have made them feel like if they fail, they aren't worth anything. So like this whole, I think area of humanity that we need to work on. And we do need to step in when people are ugly to each other.
Absolutely. And I've talked to a few people now who eventually became very successful in whatever it is they do, but they all had similar experiences with being bullied as growing young adults or as childs. And in a way, they all say the same. It's what you need in a situation where you're being bullied or where you're being abused is to be able to, or let's say, have the feeling that you can connect to someone. It doesn't need to be a lot. It's just knowing that someone is there for you. That's all. It's not about, theoretically reaching out to someone. It's really just about knowing that someone is there. And by accepting these behaviors and not calling them out, that's we're creating a environment where this becomes okay all of a sudden. And that I think is the big issue here. So
absolutely. Yeah.
You also talked about a coach that you had, and you also talked about the importance of coaches in someone's life.
Yeah. So And back when, 30 years ago, oh my goodness, I don't believe it was that long ago, 30 years ago when I tried out for my field hockey team in high school, it was a new high school. I was a boarding school, so I was away from home. First day of practice, my mom's looking at me because she doesn't want to leave me. All the parents, all the other parents are gone. My mom's still there. And, so I'm trying out this new sport on grass, and it was a hot August day or a hot September day. And I have to run 5 or 6 loops of the field hockey field. And I'd never, ever run that much in my life in one try. And it was really hard, really difficult. And I was like, what am I doing? What did I sign up for? I can't do this. I'm not cut out for sports. And, but I did it. And then we had to do a timed mile after that. And then we had 2.5 hours of practice, and where we were running up and down. And again, like for someone who like grew up in Brooklyn, New York City, running up and down the block, we were very active, but not in that way. It was always like short bursts of running. And so like I had to do all the sustained running, and then, I have to stick a ball, a mouth guard, shin guards, and clothes that weren't appropriate for being, outside on a hot September day. And part of me loved it. I loved it. I loved that it was so different. And I'm like, wow, I never thought I could do this. But it was really, really hard. And so like at one point we were doing these suicides where you run up to the 25-yard line, run back to the start, run to the 50-yard line back. It's a horrible name. I don't know why they call it suicides. But you run up to the 75-yard line, you come back.
You do it a few times and then know why it's called like this. So.
Well, I mean, I know why it's called that, but they should change the name.
Yeah.
And so, we had to do 2 of those. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we just ran all this, and I can't, and I think we had to do it with a stick and a ball, in field hockey. And I'm going up, and like everyone's like almost finished. I'm like at the 50-yard line, or at the 75-yard line, and everyone's almost finished with their 100 sprints. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I was clearly struggling. It was me and this other girl that were struggling, because we were both girls from the city. We had never had to run this much. And so the coach comes up to me. I think she's going to berate me or, say, like, you got to do better or whatever. She says, "This is hard, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I couldn't." I just nodded because I couldn't talk. And she's like, "You know what? But you're doing it. Mm. You're working. You're doing the work, and that means that you want to be out here. Mm. So keep up the good work." And I'm like, "What? Holy crap! If everybody had an experience like that." Mm-hmm. And I totally expected her to say, "Well, I don't know if you can be on the team, like whatever." And there definitely are appropriate circumstances for that. But she just said that, and like that changed my world. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! Like, okay, she's not going to yell at me. Clearly, I'm slow. Clearly, like it's this is really hard for me. But she saw me trying, and she said, "You know what? Keep going. Good job." Mm-hmm. And that was it. And that sold me. I was like, I really wanted to be on that team. That one woman, Dot Harrop. Mm-hmm. And I saw her for the first time in 30 years last year, about a year ago.
Wow, amazing.
And I told her, she had no idea that I had been this, I'd become, what I am today. She had no idea. And so she's learning all of this. She's like, "Wow, oh my goodness." And I was like, "You're in my book," because I was like, you're the one who, by your simple act of saying, "Hey, this is hard, but you're out here," mm-hmm. which means you want to do this, you want to be out here. Good job. I said, that changed my life. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm a runner today. Mm-hmm. Because after that practice, I said, holy crap, I have got to learn how to run, because this sport is all running.
Yeah,
You're running up and down the field for 2 hours, 3 hours. And so I got to learn how to run. And so the next day I went out and I did those 5 laps of the field. Mm-hmm. And it hurt. It wasn't fun. It hurt. And I was like, well, I got to get better. And so, but afterwards I was like, oh, okay. Like, because when you are sore and you do some exercise, you're a little bit less. So I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit better. And I did that a couple of times a week. And And I would see her, Coach Harrop, I'd see her out there running after practice or in the morning. And I was like, I want to be like her. Like, I want to be able to just kind of pounce up and down the hill. I still can't pounce up and down the hill, but I want to do that. And so that was it. That was like, that planted that seed.
Okay.
Yeah. And so and as you said, like I don't think everyone needs a coach, but it's definitely, when you have a coach like that,
it helps to have someone at the right moment in your life to give you that little nudge in the right direction.
Absolutely. My coach now, Mike Errett, and we've only known each other for a year, but he's also changed my life a little bit, because when we started coaching together for Boston Marathon, the first week of our training together, he gave me a really easy schedule. I'm like, well, who's this guy think I am? I can do more than this. Like, does he think I can't do this? And then, so I did it. And so the next week, like, he ramped it up. I mean, and then I freaked out. I was like, who does he think I am? I can't do this. This is too many miles. What does he think? Is he trying to make me lose weight? Is he trying to change me? And then I did it. And then he said, well, so how did it go? I was like, well, I did it. He said, well, I knew you could. And like,
there you are.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's always the capacity for more in all of us. We just need to bring it out.
Sometimes you need a little push. Sometimes you need a little, somebody to kind of tell you what you already knew, but you didn't believe it. Yeah. So.
Okay. Speaking about life-changing experiences, you had one experience in your life where a doctor told you that, Mirna, you got to change something. You need to do something here because you're killing yourself, basically.
That was back in 2008. And, I was living what I thought was a very successful life. And it was, I was working at a school. I was really good at my job. My son was 5, he's 15 now. He's a full-grown man. That's what he thinks. And, I had my husband, and, we were living and working at a boarding school. And, but every single second of my life was consumed with something not me. It was work. It was taking care of my son. It was, being a wife. It was going on the weekends to teach piano and voice lessons and guitar. I don't play guitar, but I taught guitar lessons. And so every single weekend I said, and I would have maybe a half a day off a week. And I, was much heavier than I am now. And I was coming back from one of these, my weekend gig, and I started having chest pains on the left side of my chest. And of course, when you have chest pains on the left side of your chest,
you get a little bit worried.
Right. I got a lot worried, pulled over, I'm trying to figure out, what should I do? And, I'm like, am I going to die here? Like with my son in the car. And it was very scary, like I laugh about it now, but it was a very, very scary experience. And, when I had these pains that I'd never had before. And so I eventually decided to keep driving. I was an hour away from home, which it's dumb, in hindsight, like that's the dumbest thing I should have
drive through my heart
911. And, but, I got home and went to the hospital and, and I had to stay there for 8 hours because when you have chest pains, they run you through tests for 8 hours. And just to make sure that you don't have any clotting or any damage to your heart. And so I didn't have any damage. So because it wasn't a heart attack, it was a panic attack. Which I'm like, I don't have panic attacks, and the doctor was like, well, yes, you do, because you had a panic attack. And, in hindsight, of course, I didn't have any time to myself. I was working very, very long days, at a boarding school because you teach, you coach, you do activities, you are a dorm parent at night, so those are your kids. And then you wake up in the morning and do it all again. And then on the weekends, you do trips with them and you're their parents. And then you go, then I had this other job that I was doing. And so it took its toll on me. And, I was, as I said, I was, much heavier than I am now. And I had this rash on my skin and I didn't sleep because I was always working. I would get up super early, get up like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and work. And I always had work at home because I worked at, I lived where I worked. And, and so my son was always sick. I was always sick. And so like, it was this horrible, horrible compendium of things. And finally, so when I went to the cardiologist to follow up, just in case there's anything, like do some more tests. And he said, look, how old is your son? I said, well, he's 5. He said, well, do you want to see him grow up?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't need to say anything else. That's all he said. That's what, he said, well, I need you to lose a little bit of weight, and I need you to start sleeping again. Mm-hmm. I need you to take some of those stressful factors out of your life. I need you to reorganize. I need you to reprioritize. And so I was like, okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. And that next day, it was kind of like that field hockey thing, where that even though it was so painful and just shocking to every single bone and every fiber of my body, I saw what I needed to do. I was like, okay, well, I need to get better at running. And that's one thing about me that I like about myself. I can be very clinical and very like, okay, this is what I need to do. I can look at a situation for what it is. Take all the emotion out, take all the other stuff that is not helpful out, and say, this is what I need to do. And then I do it. So the day after that cardiologist visit, I said, okay, this is what I need to do. Mm-hmm. And it was painful. Like I get on a treadmill. It was awful. It's like, I feel so bad now. Like, and I felt bad about myself. I felt like, how did I let myself get to this point where I can't even run a mile? Mm-hmm. And it hurts. Mm-hmm. And so I happened to have bought a treadmill 2 months prior, because I think in the back of my head, I knew I needed to do something. So yeah, I got on it. It was awful. And I said, well, okay, this is where I'm starting. I know how running makes me feel. I know that I will get better. I know it'll take a couple of weeks, and it'll continue being hard, but I have to do it. Like, hello, life, I'm going to live. So that was it. That was that incident that was very cathartic.
And you were at that time quite a bit heavier than you are now. You mentioned like 70 pounds
I was
heavier.
over 300 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms.
Yeah, like 150 or so. Yeah. Okay, so quite sizable. Huh? Mm-hmm. You come from a family that has struggled quite a bit with diabetes and metabolic diseases like that. So one thing I want to talk with you about is sometimes what I'm struggling a bit, and I would really love to hear your opinion about the whole thing, because I really want to learn from that. There's this fat acceptance movement, let's put it this way, and the way I think is I'm absolutely 100% with all those people who say, okay, everybody should have the right to feel whatever they want to feel in their body, and to live the life they want to live as long as it makes them happy. Absolutely. So 100% agree with that. The point that I'm sometimes worried about is when you start just accepting an unhealthy behavior, and you obviously, when you have all the right to say, okay, look, you're very active, you're doing sports, so like this discussion of who can do what, right? This is not the discussion we should have, because everyone should be able to do whatever they want to like, do the sports they want to like, to go running, go to the gym without being judged in any way. That absolutely so that's not. But what I'm sometimes worried about is with this acceptance movement, that we accept behaviors that are unhealthy, and if sometimes people add that white is it can create metabolic diseases and can lead to diabetes. So where do you see the line where we say, okay, yes, everyone should feel right about should have the right to his or her own body, but still we should be active, we should be moving, we should do something about it and to improve itself, because you yourself said you were at the point where your health was declining and you needed to do something about it. So where do you draw that line?
Well, the whole idea of fat acceptance is very interesting to me. I think the premise of the movement is that all bodies are good bodies, right? And I think that's what it is. Like the body positive movement, the fat acceptance movement, the health at every size movement, then all of those movements have that thing in common, where the idea is that you are a worthy human being no matter what size you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree with that. I am, I'm a proponent of that. Like you are worthy. You are worthy. Your humanity is just as meaningful as somebody else's humanity that is thinner than you, that is fatter than you, that is different. So that's
Absolutely.
that's where
Absolutely,
that's the idea that I love and that I share. I, as an athlete, as somebody who moves, as somebody who knows the benefits of movement, I think everybody should be moving.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we do live in a society where you have the right to do anything you want. I won't judge people for not doing what I do, or I won't judge people for their own behaviors, because they're the people that have to deal with their own behaviors. But I also think, and I'm trying to actually develop a real thought on this, a real position on, when those behaviors start affecting people in your family, or, for me personally, I didn't want to get any less healthy than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And, and looking at my family history, looking at people who have died from issues with hypertension. My grandmother had an aneurysm. My uncle, in my book, my Uncle Greg, had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people that are like amazing people. Like they were generous, open, giving, loving. They worked really hard. There are also environmental factors. There are also socioeconomic factors.
Absolutely.
That contribute to one's health. And I think, but we cannot look at someone's size or their behaviors in a vacuum. We have to consider everything. And we're not at that point yet where we're, because we judge people, well, they have this behavior, or that, maybe they're out of a job. Maybe they don't have access to good quality food in their neighborhood. Maybe they live in a food desert. Maybe they don't have enough education. Maybe, so like I think before we say things about people's behaviors, I think we have to look at the whole picture, and that's not where we are right now. But again, I think human bodies are meant to move, unless you have some sort of disabling factor. You should be moving, because that's why we have legs. That's why we have arms. That's why we have hearts, and then when, and really and this physical therapist told me, no, occupational therapist told me this. She said, when we stop moving, we stop living, right? And when we stop moving, we stop learning, and then we stop learning, we stop moving. It creates this whole cycle of us just dying. We're all dying, right? We're all dying. As soon as we were born, we're dying.
Some are dying faster, some are dying
slower. But I think it's really complicated. I think we have to not think of people's health as this one faceted thing, because there's so many factors that go into somebody's health. I grew up we grew up poor. There were some families that on our block that could afford to have their kids in sports. There were some families that did not have to be on public assistance, so they had access to better food. Like my family was on public assistance a lot of the time, So, and then those dollars, those food stamps, could only buy certain foods, or fruits and vegetables were really expensive, So we have to take those things into account. When we're thinking about health, when we're thinking about health and wellness, and but I do think that people are valuable just as they are, and everyone has a different story. Everyone, and everyone, there's a reason why everyone is the way they are.
So it's not about saying it's cool if you're 400 pounds and diabetic. That's cool. It's more about saying, hey, you are you are worthy the way you are, and I shouldn't judge you by your looks, because there's not only you being lazy, and you talk about this in the book as well. It's not about you being lazy and slop and dumb or whatever. It's considering that there are factors that not everyone can control, and that play into the whole thing.
And there are factors that you can control, but again, I think that a lot more research needs to be done. As a whole, like in the United States, people are getting bigger. Everybody's getting bigger. The norm, like for women, 67% of American women are size 14 and up. And so it's not the fallacy of one person. That's not one person's behaviors. And so we can't all be lazy and sitting on the couch, drinking soda bottles and eating ice cream. We can't all be doing that. Like, we're not all lazy. We're not all just like staying at home, not doing anything, so like there's there's something in the water. So there obviously a lot of societal factors. There are a lot of sort of food industry factors.
Oh, absolutely.
And
sugar, processed
big
food,
pharma, big food, big agriculture, all of that. And so we stopped, this, our society was built on individualism. But at some point, capitalism takes over. And so you've got to think about what kids are eating at school, the kind of food that the USDA offers to kids in public schools is the lowest quality food ever. So it's not.
Michael Pollan talks about this.
PE,
I think pizza is quality. I think Michael Pollan is the author who talks about this. Pizza is classified as vegetables
because it has tomato sauce on it.
Exactly. Which is
and so so I think people want to blame one person. They want to blame and of course we all have personal responsibility, but you have to think of the bigger picture. And see what else is happening, what else is going on. So if you have a problem with people being 400 pounds, go get to the root of it. If you have a problem with people being whatever weight they are or whatever their lifestyle is, really look into it. Don't take it at face value.
Okay. Are you happy with your weight right now?
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I have some goals of some particular races that for me, and again, I'm only speaking of myself personally, I would like to maybe, and I know this is probably going to be controversial to people that listen to this, that are in my community. For me, for performance wise, if I dropped a little bit of weight, I would be able to make the cutoffs at these particular races, because I want to do a 200-mile race in Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
Eventually.
What do you mean by cutoffs?
Time cutoffs.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to be able to sustain a certain mile pace, a mile per hour pace, in order to make the first cutoff and then the second cutoff. I want to do that, and I know that I would like physics. I know that it'd be faster if I dropped a couple of pounds, and so. But that's not why dropping a couple of pounds is for that purpose, and it's not for any aesthetic reason. And I think that's where people get all, I'm not doing it because I want to look a certain way. I think I look good. Okay. And, but I do want to do this, for a performance end. And so, but my body functions very well the way it is now. And it's incredibly powerful. It has taken me to many places. To many really awesome places, and so I'm quite happy with it.
And you're incredibly fit. I mean, looking at the videos, the exercise that you do is so definitely no definitely no question. Definitely no question that you are fit. Yeah. Let's talk about music. You're a trained opera singer, right?
Yeah, I am. Woo. So I went to so back in while I was in high school, I actually also went to Juilliard pre-college for classical singing, and I was one of 3 voice majors there. Everybody else, like the piano department, had many people, and violin, and of course it's in New York City and it's exciting, and so that was really cool. And then I went to Oberlin Conservatory of Music. And Oberlin College of Arts and Sciences for college. And so, I'd always thought that, I'd be not me. Other people thought that I'd be like at the Met singing, or like at like New York City Opera, or like, or like Bayreuth or something. And but there were other things I was interested in. So like I didn't really pursue it much after. I did for a couple of years after college. I did a lot of auditions. I did a lot of concerts. A lot of sort of singing competitions. And I did fairly well in them, but I didn't like that grind. I was determined not to be a poor artist. I didn't want to be a starving artist. And so I decided to work in corporate America. And so, but I'm always, I'll always be a musician. I'll always be a singer. I am starting to work on it now, because I have some projects in mind where I want to fuse classical music with experiences in nature. Oh, okay. So it's coming back. I still got my chops. They're not as good as they were, but I'm working towards it. And and so and I love classical music. Like there's nothing like it. There's nothing like listening to some Puccini or, some Mascagni or Rachmaninoff, and just enjoying that part of myself. Because a lot of people, again, they look at me and, they don't see a classical musician. Or somebody that can play Rachmaninoff on the piano or sing Tchaikovsky or in Russian.
Are your hands big enough to play Rachmaninoff?
They're not. They're big for a woman.
like Rachmaninoff has really had you need these really big hands to play.
Like the long, my fingers would have needed to be. But oh man, that's another thing that just kind of like we talked about before about like piano, like just kind of feeding my musical soul, like just classical music in general. Just feeds me in a way that other music doesn't, and I'm so glad that I have it in my life.
That's amazing. So, any like that project that you have, is that something that's going to launch soon? So, where can people learn more about that, or is it still in the secret development stages?
It's still in the development stages. I got to get some sponsors, but I will say that it will be an immersive experience, and arts-based experience in nature.
Okay.
And I'll be posting about it on my new website that just went live last week. It's called it's themirnavator.com. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see that one. Huh.
Yeah, it's very new. Well, I've been working on it with with a branding company for a long time, and so it finally launched. And it's beautiful. It's a really, really beautiful website. It's just themirnavator.com.
Themirnavator.com.
And
there we go. It's loading.
And it's got all my partners and my sponsors.
There we go. I didn't see that one. Oh, yeah, no, it's nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Like it. Oh, I missed that one.
I'll be posting I'll be posting all my events on that, and but also I'm a very, very heavy Instagram user. I'm actually a professional Instagrammer now. So people
official
pay me to post things on Instagram.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I'm always, you can always find out what's going on in my life there. My son actually checks my Instagram before he calls me, because then he knows where I am. He's in boarding school, so he'll call me and say where are you? Oh, I think you're in Colorado now because I saw that on your Instagram. I post there. I also have a Facebook, two public Facebook pages: Fat Girl Running, one word, and also Mirna Valerio _ the Mirnavator, and that one is kind of curated by my publicist. And then I'm on Twitter. but I think Twitter is a very dangerous place sometimes. So I'm not on Twitter a whole lot, but I do have, quite a number of followers on Twitter too. Yeah, and at themotivator@gmail.com if people have questions or comments, just don't send me a nasty comment cursing me out because I like to run.
Yeah, I see. Okay. What's your favorite song or composition or?
Oh my God, I have so many. Wow, I have so many. I really love, oh my goodness, I don't have one favorite thing. Because it's whatever, I always have a playlist in my head, always. And it's always like I have a classical playlist, and then I have like a sort of pop, hip hop, R&B, that kind of playlist too, like alternative music. There's so many things. I really love listening to Puccini and Verdi. I love listening to Callas, Maria Callas, and Leontine Price, and I love singing things in Russian because I have a big voice. I'm a big girl, and I don't have to be small when singing in Russian because it's all dark and loud, and heavy. And so,
could you sing something?
But I really, can I sing something?
Or am I putting you on the spot here?
Okay, pick a language. Let's see. Should I sing something in German?
Me pick a language or?
Yeah, you pick a language.
Well, sing German. Yes, of course. I love to hear that. Now that you mentioned it, of course, yeah.
I have to think. I was thinking, I didn't know the words. That's funny because I don't have any music on me, and usually I'm like, Schubert. I could do some Schubert or Brahms.
Yeah, I'm not picky with that.
All right, let me see if I can remember this one song. This Brahms. Internalizing. I'm gonna look at the lyrics. Okay, so it's called Immer leiser wird mein Schlummer. And
which roughly translate into my slumbers is getting quieter and quieter.
It's getting more quiet,
more quiet,
right?
Exactly.
Oh my goodness, I'm not warmed up and I'm sick. So great. Mein Schlummer. Liegt meine Kummer, zitternd über mich. Auf den Träumen hör ich dich rufen raus vor meiner Tür. Niemand wacht
Wow, that's amazing. You really can sing. Amazing. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Work on my pronunciation.
Thank you. I understood everything. So that's
that's good.
That's good. Sehr gut, sehr gut. Actually, it's sehr gut. Sehr gut gesungen. Sehr schön gesungen, Mirna.
Danke. Vielen Dank.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much. That's great.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, we talked a lot about your book, and I'm just curious, how did the whole book thing happen? So,
oh my goodness, I have the best book story ever. Because I had this blog and I had all this. Suddenly, I had all this notoriety, and I'm on all these media outlets, and people are writing articles about me, and just because I'm a fat runner, it was a story, that people were interested in. So I got contacted by 2 literary agents, and one of them, they're like, "We really love your blog. Are you considering writing a book?" And I had always been considering writing a memoir of some sort, because I've always been a writer. And, I wrote for my college paper. I wrote for some magazines after I graduated from college. And so they're like, "Hey, let's do it." I'm like, okay. And I didn't have to send out any queries. I didn't have to do any of that other work that most people have to do. And so I signed with this one agent who happened to be Barack Obama's first literary agent.
Holy shit. Okay.
And yeah. And so I went to work. They got my proposal together and they sold my book to a publisher. And then I had 4.5 months to write my book.
Okay.
And so I wrote it, and that was the easy part.
Okay.
The not easy part was the editing, and because it's like really deflates your ego.
Okay. So how does it work? How's the editing process work for someone who hasn't written a book?
Yeah. I'm sorry. What was that?
How does the whole editing process work for those who haven't written a book?
Okay. So you write your 65,000 words. In my case, I wrote 110,000 words. And so like you go, the first part of the editorial process is where you work with a developmental editor. And they're the people that work with the voice. They work with making your ideas more cohesive. And, I know I'm a good writer. Like I've always known that I'm a good writer, but like, you can always be better. You can always hone your craft. And that's what this person does. And, they tear it apart. They're not mean, but they're very clinical. Again, they look at it and like, this could be better if you did this. If you took this whole 200 pages out, if you took this, this whole chapter and reworked it and made this as your theme, because it seems like it's your theme, but it really isn't now, but we're going to work on it to make it better. And it really, sometimes it kills your spirit, but you're like, oh, like when you're done through the process, you're like, oh, that's what it could be, and so, but it's exhausting. And the editorial process took, I want to say, I started writing the book in May of 2016. And then I submitted it October 28th, 2016, the manuscript, got it back right before Thanksgiving, November 23rd or something like that. And I couldn't look at it because I was too scared to open. I was too scared to open up the editor's version. And then suddenly
they cut it into pieces for you, or they do like the editing, so they take out stuff and say, no, that's
no,
gotta go,
they don't take out. I mean, they write notes on everything. So
okay.
Now we have track changes in Word, in Word, Microsoft Word.
So it's like all red. It comes back all red.
Highlight something and it's all red. Everything is highlighted, and there are these little notes for every single thing. Hey, this would be better if you use this other word. Or occasionally I really love this paragraph, and it's just. Everything about it is, you're like, thank God. And then the next paragraph is like, please remove this paragraph. It doesn't make any sense. So, it's like an up and down. It's a constant roller coaster of emotions. And so that's that. And then after that, that's the first editorial pass. And that's the hardest, because you're dealing with all of the major things. And then so you fix it. They give you a couple of weeks to fix it. And then you go through another editorial pass, and then they give you they give you a few days to fix it. Okay. It's very stressful, because I was also teaching and working at my job. Is also racing, doing marathons, and doing speaking engagements and doing like photo shoots. And And then the third editorial pass from the developmental editor is, just like, okay, let's just fix up these few things. It looks great. Then they send it to a copy editor.
Okay.
No. Then they send it to they have a legal read. And so a lawyer reads it just to make sure that all of your quotes you're allowed to use the quotes that you use. And you're allowed, like when you speak about people, I had to get permission from my son.
Oh, really?
To write about it. Yeah.
Okay.
I had to put him on the phone with the lawyer. And he goes, yes, I give her verbal consent. He was 13. I was like, you can't give me verbal consent.
So I can give you consent to give him the verbal consent. Like
I give you consent to live. So, and then it goes through a copy editor. So it's a lot of steps. And then there's a final editorial process, and that was twice with the acquisitions editor who reads the entire book, and then ask some big questions. And then they do the final read. I get the final read, and I get to make any last minute changes that I want and that I need. And then I can't touch it anymore. Okay. And that's scary when you can't. Because I read the book now, I'm like, oh, I would have done that differently.
Yeah, you start questioning yourself probably. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
So but it was really cool. Like, it's like, holy crap, not everybody gets to write a book. Not everybody gets, or people do write books and they don't get published.
Yeah, I mean, most of the books written just they end up in like nowhere. It's like right. They sell like 5 copies to their friends, and then that's it, and then they're
right. And then like people are still buying my book. Like I get a message every day. Oh, I'm on chapter 3 of your book. I'm on chapter 19 of your book, and I love when you talk about the Marine Corps Marathon, and and it's a really cool process. And I'm like I'm about to write my proposal for my second book.
Oh wow, okay.
And which will be on adventure.
Say it again.
Because I'm utilizing adventure.
Adventure, okay.
So I don't know if you've seen my Instagram lately, but I've been trying a lot of new sports. Surfing, mountain biking.
Yeah, I saw skiing, like the
snowboarding. Rock climbing.
What do you say about that? Like that surf instructor looking at your ass all day long, basically.
And I had to apologize. I'm like, sorry.
Enjoy the view, but well.
And it's funny because it was hilarious. That was hilarious and very life-changing experience. Are you a surfer at all?
Oh no. We don't even have like the sea in Switzerland. So
if you ever have a chance to go, I don't know if like in the Mediterranean anywhere or. To go to like a Caribbean island or Hawaii or Costa Rica. This like after running, if like when I can't run anymore, I'm gonna surf because there's so many. It's just such an amazing. I love water. Any sort of water sports I love, and I didn't think I could do it. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do it. I'm gonna go anyway. I'm just gonna roll with it. And I got up on the board the first day, and it's like all these metaphors for life on the surfboard, and it's just like an incredible thing. But like the surf instructor guy, he was the head of all of the instructors, and very calm, very sort of like even measured and very young, and I'm like, I gotta listen to this young guy, but really just really good at what he did. And I was like, oh, sorry, sometimes like my bathing suit would malfunction in the front and things would pop out. And he's like, that's okay, it's Costa Rica, it happens all the time. And it was just such a chill experience.
So he got the full experience.
I never felt like stigmatized as a larger person out there. And it's it's an incredible sport. You should definitely try it. Like, and if you say you have a little girl.
We have 3 little girls.
3 little girls. Yeah. Oh my God. I have 1 and I can barely take care of him. But it's an amazing sport for kids. Okay. Like it makes you feel so powerful and incredible and like and truly connected with nature and
okay, yeah, well, we actually did try next time. We're going on holiday somewhere. I'm just miserable at water sports, and I tried water skiing a few times. And I just failed. Like I couldn't get up on those damn things. So
you know what? Surfing is way easier.
Okay, good. I like that. I'll try. I'll make it. I'll try. I'll let you know how it goes.
Right. Okay. Good luck.
Yeah, and so going back to the book. So then, how when we were done? I mean, it became a best-selling book.
it became an Amazon bestseller.
Amazon bestseller.
Actually, up until like 2 weeks ago, it was on the it was like one of like the number one bestsellers on Kindle.
Nope. Now the connection dropped.
I buy paperback because I love having the book in my hand. But
Sorry,
a lot of people.
Could you repeat everything you said after Amazon because the connection just froze for like a few seconds?
I just gotta. I'm holding. Are we good now?
I think.
Are we good?
Yeah, I see you. I hear you. So you just froze after like Amazon
Yeah,
bestseller.
yeah. Okay. So it was an Amazon bestseller up until about 2 weeks ago on Kindle. And I mean, I don't know what I did now that made people mad that they're not buying my book on Kindle. but it is, but it's, that's the way people consume books now. I love paperback books. I love, actually having the book in my hand, but I listen to a lot of books because I'm on the road all the time.
Yeah, same here.
So,
and the great thing is you can start listening and then you can continue to read and go back and forth, and that's
exactly. And so lots of people are reading on their phones, they're reading on their tablets or on their computers while they travel. It's easier, it's lighter. You can fit more books onto your phone than into your bag. And I also recorded the Audible.
Oh wow, you did to help. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So it's me. I had to audition.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did. I'm auditioning for my own book, but I get it because not everybody is like a reader.
You just don't have that Mirna feel. I don't know.
I'm like, okay, but I gave them very specific instructions.
It's not authentic. It's not authentic. We can't take you. I'm sorry.
It's hilarious because I was like, but I'm the only one that can. It's my story, but there are people that are really great narrators. But I said very specific. I was like, this person has to be able to, to code switch from like Black English to standard English to with a slight New York accent. And when she gets angry, it's the New York accent really comes out. And she has to be able to speak Spanish without an American accent. And I was very, very specific. And so I think they were like, okay.
There's only you left, so. Okay. So how long did that take recording the book? I mean.
The recording it was a week-long process.
Okay. So how many times do you have to repeat like the passages? It's like
after like the first day where you're kind of getting into your rhythm, I had to do a lot of retakes on that first day. But after you establish a rhythm, you establish your sort of workspace and how far you want to be away from the computer, how close, like, if you want a pillow against your stomach because your stomach is rumbling, after you figure that out, after the first couple of hours, it becomes, oh, okay, I can do this. And sometimes, it's because you work with an engineer, somebody who's editing as you're doing it. It's so incredible.
Oh, okay.
And then you also work with a director.
Oh.
And so, and the director is often somebody that is the professional TV director, like a radio director. And so, they'll stop you. Okay, that was really high on that. Or you're sounding a little hoarse, go take a break, come back. Or this wasn't as emotional as the writing is. So let's work on that.
Okay.
It's really cool. And my background is in theater and opera and stuff like that. So I know I can do it. And I knew that it was going to take a lot of takes. And I hadn't actually read my book in its entirety beforehand. So it was like new to me. So I would, so that was it was a really, really cool, very different kind of experience. And I actually got paid for that too.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool.
Even better.
And while you were reading it, did you have moments where it's like, that doesn't really sound well when you read out loud?
Absolutely. And every single author that reads their own book goes through that. And I was like, that syntax wasn't the best. Or, I could have described this in a different way. And sometimes if it's a word choice thing, that's like a similar word choice, you can actually change it, but they have to put a note at the end. We did change some things or if there was a grammatical error somewhere that I hadn't caught, that nobody had caught. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to change it. And I changed it.
Okay.
And then at the end, he's like, you changed it. I was like, I can't have that bad grammar because it sounds like it's so egregious. And I just can't have that. He's like, I get it. Because some people do, like, they notice it and they're like, oh my God, I don't want people to think I'm uneducated. So yeah, but and then at the end, they're finished with it. All they have to do is to do some splicing and to take out any other kinds of noises and stuff.
Yeah,
But you're in a
chapter
professional
breaks
studio.
and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And they add a little music. This is audible, or the little voice but it's really cool. I haven't listened to it.
That was my next question. Did you listen to that one at least? So you didn't read your book, but
no,
you
I don't
listen
want
to it.
to.
Come on. Come on.
I don't want to.
Maybe I'll let you know how it is.
You let me know
but
how
it's interesting.
I did.
Interesting. A few months back, I talked to another some person who also published a book both in print and as an audiobook, and he said, "No, I'm not going to listen to that one. No chance." But he didn't record it himself. There was someone else who was like, "Nah, not interested in that. So just going to ruin it for me probably." So cool. And then how did the promotional part go? I mean, was it all hands off for you? Like you just collected your check?
It's not hands off. It's not hands off. It is a very sort of intense process because my publishing company is actually owned by Amazon. So the cool thing about that was that we had all of those Amazon built-in things. Other people enjoyed blah 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 blah, and so your book would come up under that. But I definitely I had sponsors that sponsored my book tour.
Okay.
Merrill and REI both sponsored my book tour, and so like I got to go around speaking about my book, showing the video, and that was really cool. Not everybody gets to go on a book tour.
Sure.
And so that definitely helps sell books. I had to be very sort of vigilant and busy on my own social media channels and going to speaking engagements and selling the book and doing book signings and stuff. And it's pretty stressful. It's really cool that I'm able to do that. And like I actually have a book. I wrote it. It's published. People are buying it. People want to find out more. They're wondering when my next book is coming out. So that's really cool. But it's definitely not hands off. Like you have a say in most things. Like we're going to do this promotion in Australia. We need you to sign off on it. We're going to do this promotion on Kindle, or we're going to do this. Whatever it is, we need you to sign off on it. We need you to like spread the word and stuff. And so I haven't been really great about spreading the word because a lot of times in podcasts, I don't even talk about my book because I forgot I wrote it. Because there's so many other things going on. And so it's really awesome. It's, would I do things differently? Will I do different things differently with my next book? Like in terms of the way I talk about it and the way I sort of spread the word? Absolutely. Will I edit my own stuff differently before I hand it in as my manuscript? Absolutely. And will it be shorter? Hopefully.
I think it was. It's not too long if it's not getting boring, and that's the point. And some books like they are very short, but now they could be shorter still because they're just boring. They repeat themselves like in every chapter. It's like, oh, geez, get to the point for fuck's sake. But no, certainly wasn't the case with yours. So.
Thank you.
Oh, as a book critic. Cool. No, okay, that's amazing. So, when's your adventure book coming out?
I have to write it. So, probably
what are you
2
doing?
years.
Get started.
Well, I know. Next week is the week. That's the week I've slated to write my proposal.
Okay,
so hopefully something will happen. And like all the stuff that I'm doing now is all research for. Since I was named a National Geographic Adventurer of the Year.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
Yes, yeah.
Should have included that in the introduction.
So that's it's part of my identity now, and I've always been very adventurous anyway. So like I want to bring adventure to people who think it's not accessible to them. And,
like whom?
Like to people like I'm thinking about people in my home community. Who think that they think that adventure is going like climbing a mountain or something, but there's so many other things that we can do that sort of explore the fullness of humanity and the fullness of the world. That doesn't have to be ice climbing or going to Everest or doing those like really extreme things, like going to a park in your neighborhood and like digging for worms. That's an adventure. That's what I used to do as a kid.
Gotcha. Okay.
And, I'm not going to be digging for worms anymore, but I do want to show people that you can, wherever you are and whatever skin you're in, whatever body you're in, that you can have fun and you can explore. So that'll be sort of the focal point of the book.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Mirna, I want to ask you two last questions, and I'm always asking everyone the same two questions. And the first question is, this is a series of interviews, podcast about extraordinary people. And who do you consider to be extraordinary? Who is something who is inspiring, or is changing the world, or whatever you would consider extraordinary?
I had to think about this a lot because there's so many people that are so cool and that are changing the world in both small and big ways. And so the person that right now, other than my mom, who I just admire so much and who's really sort of quiet about it, is my coach. My coach is named Mike Errett, and he has run across the United States twice.
Okay.
And at every mile, he did it to honor veterans, to U.S. like military veterans. Mm-hmm. And at every mile, he stopped and planted a flag for fallen soldiers.
Okay.
And so that's 3,000 something miles across the United States, and then he also did it from north to south.
Wow. Okay.
And then he wasn't quite finished his mileage, so he went back home to Idaho and ran around this field for 300 times, planting more flags at every mile. And he's an incredible person because he's in a documentary about runners over the age of 50 that just came out on Amazon Prime a couple of weeks ago. Okay. And
what's the name of the documentary?
And what's the name of the
documentary?
I don't know. I've seen it. I've watched it many times. I'll get that information to you. Okay. But he's also he's an incredible coach, and he also grew up he had a leg deformity when he was born, and his feet were turned in, his legs were turned in, and he was told that he would never walk regularly or run, but had surgery. And now this guy's doing Hard Rock 100, which is one of the hardest, most difficult, most crazy 100 milers in the world. And he's in his late 50s, and he's still kicking it. He is still strong as hell. He's no nonsense. But he's also very loving and compassionate. When as I told you, when he's going to send me my training plan, I was like, what does this guy thinks I'm crazy? I can't do this, and he's very high expectations of other people and of himself. It's he's one of my heroes. And I've only known him for a short time. I don't think he's someone typical that you would, you might look at this guy and think he's just an older white guy in Walmart or whatever. But you don't know that he's done Marathon des Sables a couple of times. You don't know that he's done Hard Rock and that he's done these crazy 150 mile races. Because he just looks like this humble old guy. Okay. And he's amazing. He's amazing. That's my person.
Wow. Okay. I'll look him up. That's cool. And my last question, and then that would be the end of our conversation today. What's your message to everyone who's watching this or listening to this?
I have many messages.
Go ahead. We have time.
But what resonates to me right now is kindness and gratitude. Expressing kindness and gratitude in as many forms as you can. Because I often find myself when I get annoyed with myself or with other people, I'm not always kind and I'm not always grateful. So it's a practice that I'm working on that I think other people should work on and need to work on is practicing kindness in everything that you do, kindness to yourself, kindness to others, kindness to people you don't even know, and expressing gratitude in everything that you do. So that, and that's all. And I think that encapsulates everything that I do, my work, my life, my community, my family, because I am incredibly grateful for their presence in my life. I'm grateful for my community. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today. And all that gratitude, that it forces me to be kind all the time. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's what it is today.
Mirna, thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'll get in touch when you have your other book out. Let's talk about
all
that.
Right. A couple of years, but okay. Thank you so much.
Talk soon. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. And in a few seconds, you'll hear about the extraordinary person that I'm going to talk to in my next conversation. But before that, I need to ask you for your help. See, finding people who inspire and motivate you to make a change, that's what's most important to me. But to connect you with these amazing people and to bring you conversations that you will not find anywhere else, I need you to become a part of our journey. So please get involved and leave a comment below with your own questions and maybe even tell me who I should talk to next. And if you know anyone who might like this conversation, then please share it, because I'm sure that they will like it too, and it will help to grow this channel and to make an impact together. And by the way, on my website you will find all current and upcoming episodes, including show notes and transcripts, background info, books and websites of my guests, podcast links, and much more. And once you become an email subscriber, there is always some exclusive content, so don't forget to sign up, and I'll see you in the next conversation.
In the next episode, Rob talks to Bas Rutten. As one of the earliest UFC heavyweight champions, former King of Pancrase and Thai boxer, Bas Rutten has faced some of the toughest opponents and is considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. But none challenged him as much as his personal struggles, from chronic illness and bullying as a kid to beating and opioid addiction. In this episode, Bas tells Rob a rollicking tale of learning to swing through trees, standing up to bullies, knocking people out, coming out tops at a high school reunion, finding his way back to his faith, and much more. Join the conversation now.